I visited the restaurant River in Tuscaloosa, Alabama. I went with my boyfriend Ethan on a Wednesday night at about 7:30 p.m. We both wanted to try a new restaurant, and this one was very easy to find. As soon as we arrived, we found a front parking spot. It was very dark out, but the parking lot was very well lit and clean since the restaurant is in a small shopping plaza. I'm sure this restaurant has a great view during the day because it's right on the river. When we walked into River, there was no host at the stand to greet us, which was automatically gave me a bad first impression. We stood there for at least 45 seconds until a waiter finally acknowledged our presence and said that a host would be with us shortly. As we're waiting for the host, I look around the restaurant and appreciate all the decor. It has a modern rustic feel to it, which I really like. I noticed at the host stand a health rating of 90, which is very good. After eating there, it's not obvious what caused them to lose points, which is a good thing. The couch in the waiting area was very comfortable, and the lighting throughout the restaurant was bright. Finally, a host arrived and escorted us to our table, while asking if we had a preference of where we would like to sit. I said I preferred a small booth, and he brought us to a very small booth. It was a corner booth, table for two, so it was a little cramped, but very clean with no food crumbs around. He handed us our menus and said our server will be with us shortly. Thankfully, there wasn't a wait for a table when we were seated within 2 minutes of arrival, which makes sense because it was fairly empty. On the table were 2 cups for water, 2 cloth napkins, and 2 forks and knives. The silverware was clean, but Ethan's fork was bent, so we had to ask for a new one. There were no condiments on the table, but the place settings were very basic and clean, which is always good. Our server Ian came to introduce himself and pour us water. He gave us some time to look over the menu and decide what we'd like. When the server came back, Ethan and I were trying to decide which steak to share. We asked him how many ounces each steak was, and he was able to quickly list the ounces off the top of his head. Then he gave us a suggestion that the New York strip was his favorite, so we decided to go with that. I also ordered an iced tea with lemon, and we got the smoked chicken and prosciutto flatbread as an appetizer. He didn't list the specials because we heard another server telling her table about them. The iced tea came out shortly after we placed our order, and it was actually correct. Usually servers forget the lemon, so I was impressed. The server was prompt about bringing me a refill, and when he did, he brought a small carafe with more tea. The appetizer arrived very quickly and was delicious. The flatbread was very cheesy and had so much flavor, especially since it had pesto. My only complaint about the flatbread was that the crust seemed a little undercooked because it wasn't very crispy. The steak took about 30 minutes to come out, which was a little longer than expected. The server brought us steak knives about 5 minutes prior to the steak coming out. The steak looked amazing when it was served, and it came with potatoes. When the server brought the steak to the table, he forgot to bring an extra plate for sharing. The steak was cooked perfectly but was very lightly seasoned, so I asked for salt. It was a little more charred than I liked on the outside, but the inside was cooked perfectly to a medium rare. The potatoes were a little soggy but very flavorful. All the food was hot, so that was good. The prices were a little steep for what the food was and its quality. The restrooms were very modern, with lots of decorations, and very clean and odor-free, which was good considering it's a nicer restaurant. There was water all over the sinks just from people washing their hands, and the soap and paper towel dispensers were full. The trash can wasn't overflowing, and it was neat. When we finished our food, we waited for about 25 minutes until our server finally came back to clear our plates. The wait was annoying because he disappeared for a while. We were considering dessert, but by the time the server came back, we were ready to go. He brought us the check in a timely manner after he cleared our plates. The total bill came out to $57, which was a reasonable price split between 2. We finally left at 8:50, so it was about an hour and a half long meal. Even though we ended up having to wait a little bit towards the end, the server did a pretty good job. He was friendly and got all of our food orders correct, which are 2 very important things. I also really liked the tea carafe he gave me for refills since not many restaurants do that. I think that timeliness could definitely be improved because at the end we ended up waiting around for a while. Also, I would suggest using more seasoning on their food because I had to add a lot of salt to my steak. I also would have liked to have been greeted by a host when I walked in. Overall, dinner was good, and I would consider coming back.